Welcome to the Nation of History channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. A MiG-21 fighter was recorded after colliding with a residential building in East Germany in 1975. The accident drew attention for the scale of the damage and the challenges faced in rescue efforts and debris removal. A German soldier was photographed throwing himself to the ground to escape a falling shell on the Western Front of the First World War around 1917. The scene captures the constant tension in the trenches, where quick reactions could mean survival. United States Navy landing craft were photographed heading toward the beaches of Iwo Jima at 8:59 in the morning on February 19, 1945. The scene marked the beginning of one of the best-known operations of the Pacific Campaign during the Second World War. British police officers were photographed in 1888 using a battering ram to remove an Irish tenant during an eviction. The action took place amid the social and land disputes known as the Land War, which marked Ireland in the late 19th century. In the 1940s, slenderizing devices were promoted with the promise of reducing fat on hips, thighs, and buttocks. The equipment used vibrating belts that shook the user's body, supposedly encouraging inch loss without strenuous physical effort. An 1890 record shows the use of the punishment method known as the garrote in Iranian territory. The practice was part of the system of penalties applied in the 19th century, reflecting the legal traditions of the time. The city of Tulsa in the state of Oklahoma was recorded in 1921, shortly after the destruction that struck the Greenwood community known as Black Wall Street. The neighborhood, which had stood out for the prosperity of African-American entrepreneurs and families, suffered severe losses in infrastructure and housing. A group of teenagers was photographed in 1953 on top of Preikestolen, also known as Pulpit Rock, in Norway. The cliff, more than 1,970 feet high, offers one of the most impressive views of the Lysefjord region. A member of the Italian resistance was photographed in Florence in 1944 during the fight against the Nazi fascist occupation. The movement brought together armed civilians and supporters who carried out sabotage and defended cities. The scene shows the decisive role of the local population in liberating the area. A worker was photographed during the First World War cleaning the rifled interior of a 15-inch gun at the Coventry Ordnance Works in the United Kingdom. To do the job, she was hoisted inside the huge steel tube, revealing the weapon's impressive scale. A coal miner's wife was photographed in September 1938 with 3 of her children in a company-owned house in Pursglove, in the Scotts Run area of West Virginia. These homes were provided by companies as part of the industrial community system common in mining regions. David Hensley, a child who wore leg braces due to polio, was photographed in 1948 taking part in a public campaign to raise funds for building a new specialized hospital. Police officers were photographed patrolling the New York subway during the 1970s, a period marked by high crime rates in the city. The police presence aimed to increase passenger safety in a transit system that served millions every day. Israeli paratroopers were photographed in 1967 upon reaching the Western Wall during the taking of Jerusalem's Old City. The moment occurred in the context of the Six-Day War, when Israel took control of the area. The German airship Hindenburg was photographed flying over Manhattan on August 8, 1936. passing by the Empire State Building on its way to Lakehurst, New Jersey. The scene impressed by the contrast between the giant aircraft and the tallest skyscraper in the world at the time. Buzz Aldrin, who years later would be part of the Apollo 11 mission, was photographed in 1953 during his service in the Korean War after shooting down an enemy MiG-15 fighter. As a fighter pilot in the United States Air Force, he gained experience that would strengthen his military and space career. Stunt performers were photographed in the 1930s doing car stunts at high speed, jumping ramps in public shows. These displays of daring and danger drew large crowds looking for exciting entertainment. Al Capone's cell was recorded at Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania, where he spent 9 months in 1929. The space stood out for being furnished in a relatively comfortable way, including furniture and personal items, in contrast to the prison's usual conditions. Finnish soldiers were photographed raising the war flag at the border marker that joins Norway, Sweden, and Finland on April 27, 1945. The act officially symbolized the end of the Second World War on Finnish soil. United States Navy pilots were photographed playing basketball in the forward elevator well of the aircraft carrier United States ship Monroe in 1944. Among the players is Gerald Ford, a future president of the United States, seen leaping for the ball. The scene shows a leisure moment amid naval operations of the Second World War. The ship Marine Angel, 600 feet long and 70 feet wide, was recorded in 1953 as it moved along the Chicago River. The maneuver impressed because of the vessel's size against the relatively narrow channel. A German cavalryman was photographed in 1910 watching a biplane pass in the sky, symbolizing the meeting between the military tradition of cavalry and the innovation represented by aviation. The scene reflects the technological transition that would deeply shape 20th century conflicts. A man was photographed in Paris in 1950 trying Coca-Cola for the first time during the brand's international expansion. The drink's arrival in France represented the growing cultural and commercial influence of the United States in the post-war era. Long-haired students were photographed in 1966 protesting at their school after demands that they cut their hair. The demonstration reflected the decade's cultural clash as young people sought to assert identity and freedom of expression against traditional rules. In May 1949, Charles L. Langs presented a bold swimwear innovation, a pair of cups that could be attached to a woman's body with adhesive. The idea sought to offer freedom from traditional bathing suits, reflecting post-war changes in behavior. Yuri Gagarin was photographed on April 13, 1961, reading news about himself, one day after becoming the first human to travel into space. The historic feat took place aboard the Vostok 1 spacecraft and marked the beginning of the era of crewed missions. A Coca-Cola delivery truck was recorded in the 1910s, a period when the brand had already established itself as one of the leading beverages in the United States. The vehicle carried bottles in wooden crates, a typical distribution method of the time. A 1920 photograph offers a rare view from behind the face of Big Ben in London. The image reveals the complex metal framework that supports the famous clock of Elizabeth Tower, along with the mechanisms that ensure its accuracy. The Hughes H4, nicknamed the Spruce Goose, was built in 1947 by businessman Howard Hughes and became the largest airplane in the world at the time. The gigantic aircraft, made mainly of plywood, was designed to carry cargo and troops during the Second World War. Howard Hughes was photographed in the 1940s at the controls of the giant airplane known as the Spruce Goose, a wooden aircraft weighing about 200 metric tons, roughly 220 short tons. Designed during the Second World War, the model was built to carry troops and supplies, although it made only a single test flight. The crew of the nuclear aircraft carrier United States Ship Enterprise was photographed on July 31, 1964, forming the equation E=mc squared on the flight deck while sailing alongside the cruiser United States Ship Long Beach and the destroyer United States Ship Bainbridge during Operation Sea Orbit. The United States ship Shenandoah airship had its interior photographed around 1922 during construction at the Lakehurst Naval Air Station in New Jersey. The aircraft was the first rigid helium-filled airship built in the United States, marking a significant advance in aviation of the era. Henry Ford was photographed beside the first automobile he built in 1896 and the 10 millionth car produced by Ford in 1924. The contrast between the vehicles symbolizes technological progress and the Industrial Revolution brought by the moving assembly line. The Grand Canal of Venice was drained in 1456 to remove mud and sediment that had built up over the years. The intervention was part of the ongoing efforts needed to preserve navigation in the city's main waterway. A group of men was photographed in December 1922 observing the huge stone statues known as moai on Easter Island in Polynesia. The monumental sculptures carved by the Rapa Nui people were already drawing strong archaeological interest at the time. Times Square, at the intersection of 7th Avenue and 42nd Street, was the stage on June 13, 1944, for a large public gathering around a giant cash register installed to promote the Fifth War Loan Drive. The fuselage of a North American B-25 Mitchell bomber carried personalized nose art called the ink squirts, used by the 41st Bombardment Group. This kind of nose art was common during the Second World War, serving both for identification and to boost crew morale. A hired reader was recorded reading to workers in a cigar factory in Cuba between 1900 and 1910. The practice, common at the time, helped entertain and instruct the workers during long hours of manual labor. The texts ranged from literature to news and political essays, sparking debate and shared learning. 3 Girl Scouts were photographed in 1918 collecting peach pits that would be processed to make filters used in protective masks during the First World War. The collection was part of civil mobilization campaigns that directly involved the public in the war effort. A crowded bus was photographed traveling down a London street in 1928, reflecting the growth of public transport in the metropolis. The double-decker vehicle was already part of the urban landscape and was used daily by thousands of riders. Performers from P.T. Barnum and Bailey Circus were photographed in New York in 1924 after the merger that united 2 of the world's largest traveling show companies. The union brought jugglers, animal trainers, acrobats, and clowns under the same name, cementing the title, The Greatest Show on Earth. In December 1961, the Beatles performed in Aldershot, England, for an audience of only 18 people. The show happened before the band's worldwide fame and resulted from poorly organized promotion. Despite the tiny crowd, the group stayed on course toward stardom. The Beatles were photographed in 1957, still in their early phase, when George Harrison was 14, John Lennon 16, and Paul McCartney 15. The group played as wedding musicians long before worldwide fame. These first stage tryouts marked the building of the partnership that would change the history of popular music. Agnetha Fältskog, a member of the Swedish group ABBA, was photographed in 1976 during the height of the band's career. Known for her distinctive voice and stage presence, she helped cement the quartet's international success. Cher was photographed during the Academy Awards ceremony in 1973 in one of her striking looks that helped define her image as a style icon. Already established as a singer and actress, her presence at the event reflected the multifaceted reach of her career. Elizabeth Taylor was photographed in 1960 attending a boxing match in New York, watching the fight with intense focus. The actress was already one of Hollywood's biggest stars, and her presence at public events drew photographers and fans. Patrick Two Brick Swayze was photographed in 1983 with the cast of The Outsiders, an adaptation directed by Francis Ford Coppola. The production brought together young actors who later became major Hollywood names, including Tom Cruise, Rob Lowe, and Matt Dillon. Alexei Pajitnov, a Soviet programmer, was photographed in the 1980s as the creator of the game Tetris. Developed in Moscow, the electronic puzzle became one of the biggest hits in video game history, spreading quickly around the world. The simple concept, based on geometric blocks, ensured its lasting popularity. Frida Kahlo was photographed in 1924 while still young, wearing a men's suit in a family portrait. The clothing choice showed her bold stance toward the social conventions of the time and already hinted at the strength of her artistic identity. A young Winston Churchill was photographed in 1908, paying a taxi fare on the streets of London. The image shows the future British Prime Minister in an everyday moment, far from the political image that would later make him world famous. A 21-year-old lieutenant, Winston Churchill, was photographed in 1895 wearing the full uniform of the 4th Queen's Own Hussars. The image was taken 2 months after he received his military commission, soon after graduating from the Sandhurst Academy. Vladimir Lenin was photographed in 1922 in the city of Gorky next to a dog named Ida. The scene shows the Soviet leader in a more relaxed and personal moment, contrasting with his public image as a central political figure of the Russian Revolution. The Prague Spring in 1968 was recorded in images that showed popular demonstrations in the streets of Czechoslovakia. The movement called for political reforms and greater freedom within the socialist system, gaining broad support from society. The Field Museum of Natural History opened on May 3, 1921 in Chicago, Illinois, becoming one of the world's largest centers for scientific research and exhibitions. The event marked the official transfer of the collection to the new building constructed by the shore of Lake Michigan. The trading floor of the Chicago Board of Trade was recorded under construction in 1929, a year marked by intense economic change in the United States. The building symbolized the city's central role in grain commerce and in financial markets. A vending machine was photographed in 1931 at a German railway station, selling hot sausages to passengers. The equipment combined convenience and innovation, offering ready food at a time when vending machines were beginning to become popular. A milk vending machine was recorded in London during the 1940s, giving the public a practical and quick way to get the product. The equipment represented a step forward in the modernization of urban commerce and in convenience for consumers. The City Hall Post Office building in the state of New York was photographed in 1905 when it still served as the city's communications center. The structure had been completed in 1880 and combined post office functions with administrative offices. Britt Ekland was photographed around 1964 aboard the yacht of her then-husband, actor Peter Sellers. A Swedish actress and model, she quickly gained international attention during the 1960s. The image blends the glamour of European cinema with the luxurious lifestyle associated with the era's major stars. A Pan American World Airways flight attendant was photographed in the 1950s preparing meals on board in a commercial airplane galley. The scene illustrates the refined service standard that marked civil aviation of the time, when air travel was seen as a luxury experience. The invention called Spaghetti Aid was created in 1955 by American amateur inventor Russell E. Oakes. The device was meant to twirl pasta automatically, making it easier to eat noodles without manual effort. Manchester City player Mike Summerbee was photographed in 1967 demonstrating the built-in record player in his new Volvo P1800. The unusual feature reflected the spirit of automotive innovation in the 1960s, when manufacturers tested creative solutions for comfort and entertainment. An unusual tanning machine was presented in 1949 during the annual Automatic Machines Convention in Chicago. The equipment simulated sun exposure through special lamps, promising aesthetic benefits even indoors. The Ghostbusters set was photographed in 1984, the year the feature became one of the decade's biggest box office hits. The production blended comedy, fantasy, and special effects that were innovative for the time. The cast, including Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis, cemented the movie as a cultural classic. Women were photographed in 1940 receiving guidance on applying makeup, in a moment that reflected both beauty standards and self-esteem during hard times. Sessions like these were organized by brands and beauty schools to teach practical, day-to-day techniques. A practitioner called a toe doctor was photographed in Washington, District of Columbia in 1922, offering specialized foot care. Professionals of this kind worked independently, seeing clients in public spaces or small offices. The unusual invention called the feet brush consisted of brushes attached to the feet, allowing a homemaker to scrub the floor while doing other activities like reading. The idea reflected the creative spirit of early 20th century household inventions that aimed to make chores more efficient. Elon Musk as a baby was photographed in the 1970s when he lived with his family in South Africa. The image shows the future entrepreneur in his earliest years, long before his fame in technology and the space sector. The event, called Dagen H, marked the day Sweden officially changed traffic from the left side to the right side of the roads in 1967. The transition required detailed logistical planning and a broad public communication campaign. Martin County, known as the Doctor of Incubators, was photographed around 1900 when he was already using pioneering equipment to care for premature babies. His public demonstrations of incubators drew attention to the importance of neonatal care at a time when such resources were not yet common in hospitals. Ernest Hemingway was photographed as a young man in 1918 when he served as a Red Cross ambulance driver in Italy during the First World War. Even before beginning his literary career, he sought experiences that would later inspire his writing. The British Broadcasting Corporation Sound Effects Department was photographed in 1927, showing the creation of acoustic resources used in radio broadcasts. Technicians used varied objects to reproduce sounds ranging from footsteps to storms, ensuring realism in productions. A construction worker was photographed in 1931, seemingly touching the tip of the Chrysler Building while working on the Empire State Building in New York. The image uses perspective to create the playful visual effect amid the skyline of skyscrapers. A group of students in Havana was photographed in 1937, including a young Fidel Castro, identified as the boy with the lollipop. The scene shows an ordinary moment of school life in Cuba before his entry into political life. President Ronald Reagan was photographed in 1988 during a meeting with Mike Pence, who years later would become Vice President of the United States. The meeting took place near the end of the Reagan administration, when Pence was still building his political path. A Ford Model T was adapted in 1918 to operate as a small lunch stand on the streets of Washington, District of Columbia. The vehicle served sandwiches directly from the body, anticipating the food truck concept that would become popular many decades later. The ingenuity reflected the versatility of the most famous automobile of its time. President John Fitzgerald Kennedy was photographed on November 19, 1963, during the traditional ceremony where he received a Thanksgiving turkey, choosing to spare the bird. The gesture became a symbol of the practice that later turned into an official tradition in the United States. The meeting between Colonel Harland Sanders, founder of the Kentucky Fried Chicken chain, and singer Alice Cooper was recorded in Amsterdam in 1974. The unusual scene brought together two figures from very different worlds, fast food and theatrical rock performance. Linda Carter was photographed in the 1970s in character as Wonder Woman, the role that made her famous on television. The series gave the public one of the first prominent portrayals of a female superhero, mixing action and charisma. Artist Zoe Mozart was photographed painting Jane Russell for the poster of the film The Outlaw, released in the 1940s. Mozart, known as one of the leading pin-up illustrators of her time, helped create one of cinema's most iconic promotional pieces. Carrie Fisher, still a child, was photographed in 1963 watching her mother, Debbie Reynolds, backstage at the Riviera Hotel in Las Vegas. The image shows an intimate moment between mother and daughter amid the vibrant entertainment setting. 3,000 workers responsible for building the Chase Manhattan Bank gathered for a photograph in New York in 1964. The image celebrates the collective effort that made it possible to raise one of the most emblematic buildings in the city's financial center. Children were photographed playing baseball in the streets of Washington, District of Columbia, in 1940, in modest neighborhoods of the city. The scene shows how the sport became part of everyday youth life, even in places with limited resources. German soldiers were photographed in 1944 having a snowball fight inside a train car in France while waiting to move out. The scene shows a rare moment of relaxation in the middle of the military routine of the Second World War. A wine cellar was photographed in Istanbul in the late 19th century, when the city was still the capital of the Ottoman Empire. The scene shows beverages being sold in traditional containers, a common practice in markets and busy streets. Log-laden trucks were photographed in North Bend, Washington in 1943, highlighting the importance of the timber industry in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. The region was a major center for harvesting and transporting wood, vital for construction and for the war effort. A lifeguard was photographed on duty at Brighton Beach in New York in the year 1906. The scene shows the presence of professional supervision at bathing areas, a practice that was beginning to take hold on urban beaches in the United States. A high school student was photographed in 1969 representing the hippie style, marked by colorful clothes, loose hair, and handmade accessories. The youth movement reflected ideals of freedom, social protest, and a celebration of peace amid the decade's cultural changes. Students were photographed in the Soviet Union during the 1960s as they prepared before exams. The scene shows young people gathered with books and notes, reflecting the importance of education in the Soviet system. Mae Musk, 20 years old at the time, was photographed in 1969 when she received the Miss Veil Queen title. The beauty pageant took place in South Africa and marked an early stage of her public path. Years later, Mae became a recognized model and nutritionist, as well as the mother of entrepreneur Elon Musk. Meg Miles was photographed in the mid-1950s when she stood out as a pin-up model and also as an actress in film and television productions. Known for her striking presence, she became one of the popular faces of post-war American visual culture. A forklift operator was photographed in the 1960s lifting pallets of cases of canned Chef Boyardee spaghetti in a food distribution warehouse in Sonoma County. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, please use the Super Thanks tool below. Your contribution helps us keep bringing you amazing historical content. Thank you so much for your support, and see you in the next video.